However, only 4 plants used for industrial agriculture have been cultivated throughout the world since the last 20 years. They are mostly soya first, designed to be Roundup tolerant, and then corn, and then the same thing, and canola and cotton. So only little plants, feeding most of the time the animal industry. And we can ask why they have been modified in their hereditary patrimony, because you know it is officially modified by humans. So we should question why. And what we see is that 99.99% of those, let's say 100%, have just been artificially modified in their genome in order to be able to absorb or contain a lot of pesticides. Pesticides are killers of any form of life, either herbicides for plants, fungicides for fungi, or insecticides for insects. So 80%, approximately 80% of the transgenic plants are designed to contain more herbicide. They absorb it, and they absorb it so much so that the United States and Monsanto requested to the European Union thresholds that were 100 times greater than before, containing the residues of Roundup in the soya, in the transgenic soya. So they are sponges of herbicides. And the second character is that the plant is making its own insecticide, so its own pesticide, because an insecticide is a pesticide. Like the BT corn making its own pesticide. So you put less chemical pesticide on the field, but the plant is making 10,000 times more, because it's a new insecticidal toxin produced by the plant, which is not tested well on human health. And 100% of GMOs since 20 years have just been modified to contain high levels of pesticides. So this is toxic not only for the soil and the environment, but also for humans.
It's fine.
And what effect does this have on humans?
These pesticides have been used since decades, in fact, and they have been invented as toxic gas for the war, for the 2 world wars. For instance, at the first beginning, mustard gas, which was very irritant, has been invented by industry, and then Zyklon B for the concentration camps by Hitler. It was used as the first insecticide in France and in the world. And then gas sarin, which is the most toxic gas known, inducing a lot of migrations of populations from Syria, out of Syria, and coming to Europe, for instance, was invented as a pesticide in the 30s, in between the 2 world wars. So most of them have been financially supported by the states during and in between the 2 world wars in order to kill people. If you dilute them, they are still very toxic at very low levels, because they can kill different forms of life and our own cells, but not immediately, like the toxic gas during the war, but on a chronic level, because they do bioaccumulate and have long-term effects on health, because they are like sand in our bodies, sticky and embedding the cell-cell interactions, which are useful for our nervous system and our hormonal system to work. So that can give cancer, hormonal cancers, hormone-dependent cancer like prostate or breast cancer. I worked on that for 15 years. Or that can give also immune diseases, digestive diseases with liver dysfunction. We have shown that we had a lot of liver dysfunctions with rats given low levels of pesticide Roundup. In fact, with these pesticides, we have a lot of chronic diseases like hormonal diseases, nervous diseases, immune diseases, and also we have malformations, the reduction of sperm. So a lot of chronic things that are affecting all the families today on the planet. You know, if you request, if you ask to people, for the people you love closely, for the people that are counting in your life, Do you know somebody who has one of these chronic diseases that has to be cured by chronic treatments? Every family says, yes, we know somebody in our group, in the people we love. So that's abnormal because this was not existing before the two world wars. And you know that we have whole these chemicals in our bodies today because they are spread everywhere, and you can recreate these diseases on rats with low levels of these chemicals. So we know that they cannot be avoided in the reasoning on their effects on health. Not only can pass from generation to generation, but their effect through epigenetic changes. We have seen, for instance, that rats that were impacted and polluted by some pesticides. Michael Skinner, a great scientist in North America, has shown that their grandchildren are affected on 5 generations and are avoided by females because this pesticide is a hormone disruptor, and this will embed the genes that are dedicated to sexuality and reproduction.
And have there been studies that showed the same
The people on so many generations, but we know that it does affect the sperm quality that has been shown on farmers, testicular cancers, and also malformations at birth.
Does it show up in
Why does that bioaccumulate so much? It's because it's made out of petroleum. Plasticizers and pesticides are made out of petroleum and necessitate a lot of petroleum energy. You know, like motor gas residues, they do stick and affect our health. And this is because they are the residues of the petroleum filtration and distillation. So they are like aromas, because where does the petroleum come from? It comes from the fossilization of plants and aromas of the plants. So it smells a lot, and it's sticky and black, and when you burn it, that gives broken aromas from which pesticides are synthesized by the chemical industry or plasticizers. And this will affect our hormonal system not by chance, but just because they are like sexual aromas instead of the good, excitating and aromas giving us pleasure, like the plant flowers aroma.
And when we say aroma, we're talking about chemicals.
Aromas are chemicals, but the natural aromas are not synthetic chemicals. The artificial aromas from petroleum and pesticides that you can taste are in fact synthetic aromas with a lot of petroleum residues in it. Because I was an expert during 9 years for the French government, working in the committees that were assessing the GMOs from industry, I was asking to my research team and in my university what a GMO can do in the body if you eat that regularly. So in order to know, because the industry never did that, stopped after 3 months of consumption of a GMO, we have given a GMO together with Roundup that was spread on the field, but only at 33% of the diet. It was in an equilibrated diet in comparison to controls receiving a regular corn. We have given this GMO to rats, 400 rats in total with the controls, and this during 2 years. So the longest test ever made on a GMO and on a pesticide. And in order to know if there were any side effects, what they were due to, we have also given little doses of Roundup in another group of rats in the tap water in order to know if the side effects could come from the Roundup itself contained by the GMO, because remember, the GMO has been modified in order to contain high levels of Roundup. So the result was that the rats began to die, the females, from huge mammary tumors, hormone-dependent mammary tumors, bleeding. They were not all cancers, but some of them became cancers. And anyway, the rats were dying because it was there were hemorrhagic tumors inside the bodies, and they were making a lot of pressure on vital organs. And then there were also, as well as in males, huge diseases at the liver and the kidney levels. And the rats were intoxicated. You know that livers and kidneys are major organs for detoxification. So they were affected a lot. And we found that the pesticide Roundup did the same thing. So it was mostly due to Roundup, but also to some extent to the genetic modification itself. So we understood exactly the mechanism by which, in the details, the GMO and the Roundup associated, because it doesn't exist, tolerant GMO, which is Roundup tolerant and which is not used with Roundup. So we have understood exactly the mechanism by which it renders the animals and us sick. So these tests were conducted by my lab in the University of Caen and in various places where we could do a lot of analysis, because you know what we did with, for the first time in the history, we raised 3.2 million euros in order to test products that were already commercialized, and we did 100,000 analysis for different parameters in total on the 400 rats. So we did a lot of analysis in various places where the machines were to make these analysis. To make this analysis. This experiment that was pretty long, 2 years, the entire life of the rats, we had several groups. These groups were, first of all, of course, like in any experiment, the control group, receiving no Roundup and no GMO, but a regular diet that was controlled to avoid any GMO or pesticide. And we grew the plants to make the pellets for the rats, an equilibrated diet, ourselves. This is important. And then we had a group eating only the GMOs at 3 doses in the diet. We had a group eating GMOs treated by Roundup in the field, but the diet was containing some Roundup. And we had a group with a regular diet plus no GMO, plus a little bit of Roundup in the tap water at very low levels, the levels authorized in the tap water in North America, for instance. And we saw that the problem was coming not only from the Roundup, mostly from the Roundup, but also from the GMO itself. This experiment that was pretty long, 2 years, the entire life of the rats, we had several groups. These groups were, first of all, of course, like in any experiment, the control group, receiving no Roundup and no GMO, but a regular diet that was controlled to avoid any GMO or pesticide. And we grew the plants to make the pellets for the rats, an equilibrated diet, ourselves. This is important. And then we had a group eating only the GMOs at 3 doses in the diet. We had a group eating GMOs treated by Roundup in the field, but the diet was containing some Roundup. And we had a group with a regular diet plus no GMO, plus a little bit of Roundup in the tap water at very low levels, the levels authorized in the tap water in North America, for instance. And we saw that the problem was coming not only from the Roundup, mostly from the Roundup, but also from the GMO itself. In fact, we had a lot of fights with industry when I was an expert for the French government to ask them to do longer tests. But I was not in majority, and then I discovered. So when I was expert during 9 years, I requested longer term tests because the industry was doing only 3 months. And I said, it's not enough on mammals to see the chronic effects. It's obvious to anybody. and they say we don't want to do more. And this was accepted by other experts because there were a lot of conflicts of interest that I discovered little by little. And some of them defamed me a lot, and I won against them because they had conflicts of interest in court several times. So when I was expert for the French government during 9 years, and then I was also expert for different countries like Australia, Philippines, New Zealand, China, India, Canada, etc., for the European Union or from other organizations, I said always, 3 months is not enough, and give your blood analysis that you've made. They didn't want to prolongate the tests, and they didn't want to give the blood analysis. And I saw that a lot of other experts were just saying the industry is right. And they were discrediting not only my ideas, but also my person. So I won series of, in fact, 4 court affairs for defamations. And now, but it took years, and I discovered in the process a lot of conflicts of interest between them and industry. And they were working with industry and sometimes paid by industry in order to make their own research and in order to help the biotechnology development. So they were narrow-minded to help industry, you know, and the governments were helping them to do that in order to supposedly lower down the unemployment, etc., but it didn't have this effect anyway. And it affected, in my view, the human health a lot. So you cannot get children sick because you want to help biotech industry, you know, or chemical industry. That's even criminal. So then, when I saw that there was no financial help possible for the government to my lab, because they say that they cannot financially support tests for products that they have already authorized, then I decided to do some crowdfunding, to make lectures outside, to publish books, so that I could make this research.
What kind of funding?
Crowdfunding. So in order to make these long-term tests, I was obliged to do that by myself in my lab because I requested the money from the government they didn't want several times because they do not want to financially support another expertise on the product that they have already authorized. You know, some ministers are involved, some industries are involved, and they do not want that. So we did some crowdfunding in order to make that. It was the first crowdfunding that harvested 3.2 million euros in order to control industrial products that were already commercialized, namely Roundup and a GMO. So we did that during 2 years, which is the lifetime of the rat. So it's like if we tested that during 50, 60 years on humans, instead of 3 months on the rats. And what we found was very severe chronic disease appearing in the second part of the life, after 1 year. And there was then, you know, the media all over the world. It was the pictures of the rats with large tumors were on all the TVs and the journals all over the world. I was really bombed by questions by journalists in many countries. And there was a lot of reactions, good from some scientists and from the journal who published us, and very bad from others. You know, some debate about science is, I mean, the normal and natural way to do in order to understand how life functions and what are the effects of products on health. But to this point, with so much violence from the guy that in fact I knew, and that were the guys who authorized these products on the market, you know. They were supposed to be independent scientists, but they didn't say, because their names were hidden, they didn't say that they were authorizing in the committees that I knew these products.
Great.
Now, one should know that the industry do not authorize the product himself. So the industry gives requests, ask with health tests, 3 months long, to all the agencies, health agencies around the world, and the same tests. The countries do not do the tests by themselves, they just read what industry has done. And there are committees in Europe, in the States, in Australia, New Zealand, etc., in China, to proofread what the industry has done, but it's always the same test, and they coordinate. This has been demonstrated in order to avoid diverse views. And we saw a lot of conflicts of interest. It's a mafia having criminal activities. I can tell you that I believe today that the pesticides are killing more than the 2 world wars, you know, and GMOs have taken the same slope just because they are sponges of pesticides. But you cannot see that on the short term. This is why you cannot link in American people that are eating the most GMOs. You cannot link all the chronic disease to that because it's not labeled and it's not tested and they are not followed for the side effects. So since 2012, we made many other discoveries. First, we republished our study and confirmed it by studying all the genes that were disturbed in the rats, the so-called huge transcriptomic analysis, very detailed. Then I was wondering why this was creating so many diseases, and we saw that we tried glyphosate alone on human cells and Roundup, which is a mixture of glyphosate, about 40%, plus other additives that are classified as inerts and confidential by the company. So I tried both, and what I saw is that Roundup was 1,000 times more toxic than pure glyphosate, even though all the NGOs and governments and media and companies were saying Roundup is glyphosate. Speak about scientific words. So we discovered some hidden poisons, which are now, we know that, in all pesticides. These hidden poisons, identified by mass spectrometry, which is a very nice technology in order to know all the details of a mixture, are in fact petroleum residues burned. The end of the distillation of the cuves, you know, when there is a distillation of petroleum, together with animal fat, and this is burned. This gives very corrosive detergents like white spirits, and these are mixed together with the glyphosate or with other so-called declared active principles of pesticides in order to get a major toxicity at very low levels. But there are some frauds in the system, because if you test glyphosate alone, either on a plant or a human cell, it doesn't work. So it's not an herbicide, or it's not the major toxic compound. It's not the active principle like it is declared. So this is a major fraud. So you have declared the wrong product, glyphosate. And everybody speaks about that, but it's the wrong product. Then, if you look at the petroleum residues burned and oxidized, very dangerous stem cells, they have herbicide capacities, a lot more than glyphosate alone, and they have toxic capacities, a lot more than glyphosate alone, 1,000 times more. It's not nothing. So these are declared as inerts and confidential by the companies. This is a second major fraud.
Is it called inerts and
Inerts.
confidential?
Say that one again.
So these products are declared as inerts and confidential by the company. So this is a second major fraud. So two frauds, and that results in a criminal activity because the regulatory system says that you should test to optimize the risk only the declared active principle on the long term. So they test only glyphosate alone. So the regulatory system says that you should test only the active principle on the long term, the declared active principle, in order to optimize the study of the risk. However, if you do not declare the good one, it's a fraud. Then all the states and the governments and the agencies say that the threshold, the limit that you can eat or have in the environment is very high because you tested the wrong product, which is not the most toxic. So the threshold should be 1,000 times lower than accepted today for pesticides because of these hidden poisons that are then in the environment, in the food, in the water, everywhere, even in the air when you spread the pesticides.
So can you,
I was attacked a lot by the health agencies, by the Academy of Science, by companies, in order to say, well, mostly the people that have authorized the products, you know, this is not good science, the rats are prone to tumors, we have answered to that. He's an activist, he's not a real scientist, even if my group has published the most on the planet on this topic, more than them, in peer-reviewed scientific high-quality ranked journals. And they still say, this is bad, but they have not done better. And they still say that I should do better. However, we have put everything on the table. We have put the transparency, and the industry lacks considerably of transparency because they do not want to say what are the confidential hidden poisons in the pesticides, and they do not want to give the blood analysis of the animals submitted to the GMO or the GMO containing this pesticide. So it's a magic, or is it a mythology or science? So this is not, in my mind, very modern biotech. It's just a massive fraud about hidden poisons.
Okay.
In my lab, we said, okay, we have found that all these animals and humans are contaminated by GMOs and pesticides and other hidden products present in the pesticide, like heavy metals and other plasticizers in the hidden formula. So we said there must be a way to get rid of these products from the body. So we went back to the traditional plants used in medicine to detoxify, and we tested that on human cells, and we tested that on rats. We published that for the last paper in the summer 2016, so it's quite recent, you know. And we saw that with a mixture of aromatic compounds, you can in fact replace the poisons that are broken petroleum aromatic compounds. So it's the same but natural structure, so you can replace the poisons in your body, and to stimulate the genes of detoxification, which are the garbage, the so-called garbage cleaner genes in our body, and there are more than 450, and we can stimulate them. And this was done with a chef with whom I have written my last book, and the goal is to use this medicinal herbs has aromatic compounds a little bit on the plate, so that it stimulates your saliva, it stimulates your gastric and hepatic juices, where there are a lot of cleaner enzymes allowing the detoxification of the bodies. So I think that, I don't know if it will work completely and fully, but I think we can get rid of most of the pollutants if we eat clean food without GMOs and pesticides, let's say organic foods, because they avoid these products, and if we have in addition some aromatic detoxifying herbs, fresh ones. You don't have to drink an herb tea, the same one all the day long, and be fed up with it. You have to give stimulation to your body, and you know what? It will also stimulate your libido and your sexual activity, because the first thing that the pesticides do is to inhibit the hormonal system and the reproductive hormones.